There we go. Well, thank you very much for everyone who's joining us today. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Empirical, for helping this happen today. We have a great session for you today, looking at how we can grow the industry's future. We will be beginning with our panel, which I will hand over to the host, Marilena, and I'll let you take over.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here in the Upskilling Summit. I'm Marilena Rivera from Accenture. I have been working with TIP for the past few years, developing TIP Academy. TIP Academy has been a collaboration between Accenture and TIP to promote and create content in order to close this talent and skill gap that we are facing now in the industry, right? So in these years, we have developed a series of learning content that goes from self-paced online courses, also workshops and webinars, and that's how and why we are here today. We're gonna show you, we're gonna talk about one of the latest workshops we're pairing with Accelera and Rimedo, and it's related to rig app development for energy efficiency. And right now my colleagues here, Marcin and Arnaud, are going to talk about a little bit about this. So please, Marcin or Arnaud, can you tell us a little bit about Rimedo and Accelera?
Okay, thanks. Hello everybody, my name is Marcin, I'm from Breakouts. We are a spin-off from Poznań University of Technology in Poland, and we focus on 3 areas. One is training and consulting, second is XApp development, XApp and RAP development, and the third is research. And I think we bring basically all of those 3 into this particular course.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me here. I'm Arnaud from Accelera. So Accelera is a Belgian company. We are an open run software developer, and we do mainly 2 things. First of all, we develop our own CU and rig platform, which is the topic of the day, and we'll cover that in more details afterwards. So that's our own development that we started, say, back in 2018 now. So we have already a few releases of these ORAN components. And the second thing that we are doing is that we are taking these components and creating an open private 5G solution, meaning a private 5G network solution which is based on the Open RAN principle. And we go to market with that solution, so which is using our own components, which we are integrating with third-party DU and RU, exploiting the benefit of the Open RAN principle.
Great. So lots of interesting things going on. So that's why we partnered with them, and we are developing a 5-day workshop related to rig and apps development for energy efficiency. So why do you think this topic is relevant and is important, taking a look at the landscape right now and in the future?
So again, there are 3 things I would say. One is that we already had a webinar, and that webinar was really successful in terms of the number of people, but also in terms of the engagement. So we had a lot of interactions and interesting questions coming out of it. So we sort of had this small probe of if there is an interest in this particular topic. Secondly is because it's time, and both energy efficiency and intelligence and automation are important. So energy efficiency is the topic at the end of most of the operators. And both in TIP, PRIA, Memorandum of Understanding, and also recently established new focus group in Oran Alliance. And we see an interest in this particular topic, but also discussing that with the operators. And then thirdly, because it's not only about intelligence, it's not only about energy efficiency itself as such, but both of those together. And then the most important from my side is that it's not only theory, but also hands-on. So for this, I can pass to Arnaud. He can speak more about it.
Yeah, thank you. And fully support what Marcin just said. I think for us, this training and the rig in particular is a very important area of Open RAN. I think when we look at Open RAN, I think the open data and the open controls of the RAN is key innovation vector for, let's say, the operators, but also for independent developers to come on board and to bring the innovation that the operators are looking for in the RAN intelligence. So the RIC has been a big area of investment for Acceleron since the beginning of the company. When we went into the O-RAN or X-RAN movement at the time, let's say we quickly put a first version of our RIC platform on the market. That was back in 2018. And very quickly we got a lot of positive feedback working with the likes of BT, where they could for the first time develop an app to interference management using their own algorithm by the fact of having open data and open controls. So that has given us a lot of confidence in the benefit of the RIC platform, of the RIC as a vector for innovation. And we have, let's say, always continued in this path of innovation, supporting independent developers. We've been working with Rimedo on certain opportunities and occasions, be that MWC or specific projects that we've done together. And we've developed, as part of our RIC platform, an SDK, a software development kit, which will allow third-party developers to bring their own innovation to the Open RAN. We've experienced with a hackathon recently, which we did in collaboration with Digital Catapult, where we brought in around 10 developers with no experience at all of Open RAN and RIC development, and very quickly they could build an efficient MVP, minimal viable product of energy efficiency management. So I think this is just a token that with a very little training, with a very little introduction, you can get access to innovation that in the past were totally closed and totally reserved to, let's say, vendors that were closing, let's say, their ecosystem. And today we open the door to innovators to bring their own innovation to the market. And this training, to me, is a great opportunity for aspiring developers and aspiring innovators in the telecom market to access to, let's say, the opportunity to bring their own product to the telecom market.
Great. Well, as you said, it's a great opportunity. It's going to be a 5-day workshop. It's going to have some technical content and theoretical content, and it's going to have some hands-on activities. So what do you think are the 2-3 key topics that the people that attend to that workshop will take away with them and can, use in their future jobs?
Yeah, so thanks for this question. Actually, I think those 3 topics were already mentioned, so we sort of can repeat those. So the first one is about the XApp design itself. So we start with RIC, all the interfaces, both the non and near RT RIC, the E2, E2 and A1 interface, the details about the procedures, and then also E2SM, so service models, how we get this data and so on. And then we go towards more practical aspects like the design of the XApp and ARC itself, but also how those XApps interact with the conflict mitigation function that was mentioned as one of the key topics today in the panel in the main stage. This is a new area, and this is still sort of work in progress. That's why we not only sort of teach on this particular course on the things that you could do now, but also where is sort of the future, right? So that's one of the areas. And then the other topic, as we mentioned, is energy efficiency. So we start how the energy efficiency is placed within the ORAN context. What are the measures, so energy consumption metrics and things like that. And then ultimately we go to the use cases that are written by both TIP and ORAN Live. And then the final sort of point, which we already mentioned, which is the hands-on part, deals with the actual implementation of the XApps for that particular use case. So I think the most important benefit from it is that you not only work on an XApp for anything, but it's placed in context, and that context is also supported by the background information from the theoretical foundation.
Great. So I guess and I understand that the people that will attend to this workshop must have some kind of knowledge about the landscape and the ecosystem. So Arnaud, what do you think it can be the profile of the people that will join, and when is it planned to launch?
First of all, I think just to complement what Martin said, I think that the very important point is that this training, this workshop is going to be very practical. So after the theoretical introduction and the context setting that Marcin just described, every participant will have access to a real platform with real data being generated. So they will have the opportunity to develop their own energy-saving XApp, obviously not overly sophisticated, but really to get their feet wet in real XApp RAP development. And I think that's very important. We don't want to do anything theoretical only. We want to make it very practical. So that's where we are very happy as Accelerant to collaborate with Rimedo and the TIP Academy to bring for each participant an instance of the RIP platform on which the participant can develop. On top of that, they will have hands-on support. So during the development that they will do, they will have support from experts, from Accelerant and from Rimedo to help them with the development of the application. So that's very interesting. But to come back to your question in terms of the profile, I think that's pretty wide. I mean, what we've seen in previous experiences is that we see people interested in this type of thing coming obviously from the RAN world, people who are RAN engineer, RAN experts, but also people coming sometimes from purely the academic world, right? Mostly little or no telecom or RAN background, and they can acquire that during the training and apply their own skill set, sometimes in AI/ML, for instance, to problem of the telecom world. And we've seen that combination, which is a very powerful one, in the previous hackathon that we've done, where people coming from a telecom background and would share their experience with people coming from the academic background. And I think that's really the richness of the type of workshop that we want to set up here. So I think it's a pretty wide audience. Obviously, there's a few prerequisites, but if you can do a bit of Python development, if you're quite technically astute, I think there's quite an easy way to get up to speed very quickly with the introduction and the context setting. But I think at the end, it's going to be very practical, hands-on, with a lot of support. And then last but not least, because you were asking me also when that was planned, so it's going to be taking place in Q4 this year, right? So obviously the registration is now open for that. So if you go on the TIP Academy website, you will find a way for you to put yourself on the waiting list. I think we're trying also to limit the number of participants so it remains interactive and personalized. So we're trying to limit it to 15 participants for the first cohort.
Awesome. Well, if you are interested, go to the website, or you can contact either John or Machine or not, or myself, and we can get to it. Okay, so I think this gives you a little bit an overview of this workshop. This is one of the many things that we are doing, and we think we need to keep on doing this. We need to keep promoting this kind of upskilling and new knowledge that comes from the expert in the industry, because at the end, the people is working on that, and they are sharing this knowledge in order to other people understand what is happening in all this process, okay? So as you can see, you have heard around during these 3 days, well, the change is here, but also more changes and challenges are coming. And, well, people in the ecosystem need to be open-minded in order to get new types of doing things, especially in network development. And I think, training is the key. Training is a must. So everybody must be trained, and this is one option that we are showing you. Thank you very much for being here, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you very much to everyone on the panel. It's absolutely fantastic. And just to echo what Marilyn said, one of the big themes that's been happening across the main stage in every conversation is about upskilling, what's happening next, and this is a great opportunity within that. I'd like to also say, if you want more information, Accelerant can be found up on the expo floor. Martin, I'm sure you're still around for a few hours, and as I say, Marilyn and I are also available. So I thank you very much, and we will move on to our next speakers. Thanks, guys. It's my great pleasure to welcome my near neighbour from the beautiful northwest of England, Dave Hudson, from Empirical, and he's going to take you through their presentation, and I also want to pass this over to you.
Thanks, John. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this session. We're really pleased and excited to be involved in this session. Empirical as a business, this is exactly what we're about. In terms of supporting the industry, the sector, we're all about training, we're all about raising awareness and skills to really accelerate the deployment and awareness of technology. So when we saw this session happening as part of Fyuz this year, it was a bit of a no-brainer not to want to be involved in it in some way. So I'd like to introduce, as John has done, myself. I'm the CEO of the organisation, and shortly, as part of this presentation at the beginning, before we lead into a panel session, Gavin Mitchell, our CRO, will also talk a little bit about Empirical. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a bit of background to Empirical, because some of you may have heard about us, some may have heard the name but not know too much at all. And I think the key thing here is, I just want to scene set in terms of telling you a bit about Empirical. We've kind of got that right, I hope, as part of sponsoring the summit. If this turns too much into a sales pitch, I know you'll start throwing eggs at me. But the key thing here is to try and create and share really some of the learnings that we've seen over the years of being involved in training, what we're currently seeing, that might then lead into questions that the audience might have, or certainly debate within the panel session. And I think that's key. I mean, there's no doubt about it, about the criticality of this topic. You don't need to spend more than 5 minutes in the floor and in the other talks within Fyuz to see what an exciting time it is in the industry. I mean, I've been in the industry nearly 30 years now, and yes, there's always change, there's always new developments, but there's a real sense that the coming together of tech and telco technologies is more accelerated, faster than it's ever been. So it's got to be an exciting time, but it's only an exciting time if we're upskilling the industry, if we're taking people already in the industry with us, and we're also making it exciting, and we're also motivating and encouraging new people to join the sector. So a little bit about Empirical. As I say, we've been training over 20 years, which is a long time in the training business, and our business has evolved and developed a lot in that time. I think we added up the other day, as I'm saying here, we've over that time we've reached more than 15,000 students in some way, either on one of our courses or on one of our longer programs in more than 180 countries. One of the key things, though, that we've really spotted as a trend and has really evolved the business over the last couple of years was really the whole move from classroom training, training that people go on for a couple of days or more at a time. People just don't have time for that kind of learning anymore, and we made a conscious move to actually create a library of content, to move a lot of our content into a video format so that it can be taken in much more modular, bite-sized approaches, because that's the way that people need to learn today. They don't need to sit and do lengthy sessions. They need to know the bit they need to know about at that time and make it very accessible. So we've essentially got quite a powerful training library that can be gone through hour by hour as foundational training, but also we find a number of our customers are using it as kind of a reference material. So it might be topics that they know, they covered a couple of years ago, but they've come back to a project where they need to be a bit more on top of their game on that particular topic. They can drop into our training library and reappraise themselves at that kind of piece. We're not just, though, about pure one-way training. We have also developed a number of applications that sit within our environment so that people can do training, but they can also get hands-on practice and see some of the immersive tools that we've already got. So we focus on the mobile sector, and that's really where our expertise is. We have got a whole range of training. We concentrate on video training because we deliberately decided that the most impactful training in terms of that kind of format is to try and make the scenario, the situation, as much like classroom training as it can be. So it's not just kind of PowerPoint notes with voiceovers. But what is important is all our courses not only have video content, they come with comprehensive notes. They're integrated into the video, so that it's very easy to move and chop and change between them. But the key thing is, although we have a library, we do a lot of work to bespoke content, adapt what we've got for any customer requirement. And the other key factor, which Calvin will come on to talk a little bit about, is we don't just leave organisations and learners to themselves. We actually have a dedicated role within the business that is involved in learning engagement, making sure that people who are using our content really know about how to best use it, how to motivate themselves to make the time for learning and development. And just a few samples in terms of some of the customers, both currently and over recent times we've worked with. So we work with a number of sectors, from operators, government agencies, through to a number of other key players in the sector. So I'm going to stop now. That is definitely the kind of sales pitch over, but it's definitely, I needed to do that to give you an idea if you didn't know the kind of things we're up to and what we're doing within the sector. One of the things, though, that I need that's actually on your shares as part of this session that we wanted to bring to your attention is that we believe that this is a great event of the sector, lots of corporate interest and investment in the sector here, but it's really important for us that we're giving something back to what we're doing here, and people development is a key thing. So we wanted to link in a little bit with the kind of growing and cultivating theme of Fyuz this year. So one of the things that we're doing, and so that people get a bit of a taster of the kind of content that we're doing, we've made one of our most popular current courses available, and it's been a topic that's been covered this week around non-terrestrial networks. People can have access to that, try it out, see what you make of it, and in response we found a really good organisation that was supporting. So UNESCO-supported charity that is encouraging skills development, particularly within undeveloped countries and with women. So we're going to make donations as part of that. So please pick up a leaflet that's on your chair, tell your friends about it, because we're really keen to show that we're getting something back as part of what we do, but obviously it will also give you an opportunity to see what I talked a little bit about firsthand. Okay. So perhaps moving a little bit now into some themes that we can pick up more in the panel. We entitled this session kind of Growing the Industry's Future. And I think the key thing that we want to make here is that, and I think hopefully this will come out on the panel later, things don't just happen. If you've got a vision of the future, if we've got this exciting world that we're saying is happening within telco and tech and some of the kind of transition between the two at the moment, we've got to kind of define that. It won't just happen. And so, some quotes about famous Peter Drucker, whether it's creating the future, you don't just let it happen, you prepare for it today. And if you just humour me for a moment, because those of you, some of you might have seen this ad before, but back in 1994 in the UK, there was a little brand that was new to the UK at the time called Orange, who launched their mobile service back in 1994. You might have seen this before, but it gives a little bit of the view of how they saw the future then in 1994 and how they pitched it. We've definitely come a long way, haven't we, obviously, in 20 years, but also, what hats off to that ad at the time and thinking of that Orange brand. Very simple message about how things were going to be different, creating that future. So, as I said, a bit of reminiscing, but also an important point that, if we're going to really see the opportunity as an industry, as leaders and people within that industry, within our industry, we need to create a vision that's exciting, simple to understand, that either people within the industry want to be part of, or people who aren't at the moment want to get part of, and so on. I think, what I've done here is a kind of SWOT view of kind of the sector, and I think there's a few things I just want to sort of pick out. It's a really exciting time to join the industry. I mean, if we can't sell this to people in terms of why they would want to be involved in the industry, why they would want to be upskilled, about how communications is at the heart of everything that everyone's doing, and the varied and exciting career options that exist within telco and tech. We need shooting. We've got a lovely story to be able to tell and build on. There's no doubt about it that telco is reinventing itself, and that's why it's a perfect time to really bring together this skills agenda and promote it. So we've got a real opportunity to make the industry and the sector more exciting to people and the opportunities than ever. We've clearly got some shorter-term challenges. A lot of the players within the sector, it's a heavy sector for investment, and there's short-term inflationary pressures. But I think we look more to the left-hand side and say, well, look, over the medium to longer term, this is a really exciting sector that we can really promote opportunities for. One of the other things that we're seeing that links in with the skills agenda is also this concept of a kind of modular or a composable business. Some of you might have seen people like Gartner talking about this. And this is where we need to make the people of the future, in our view, much more multi-skilled, much more adaptable than they've perhaps traditionally been used to. Because if, we saw in COVID how businesses pivoted, changed, had to adapt. They only did that by being able to take a much more flexible, agile approach to the teams that people were in, the kind of structures that they had, so that they were able to do that. They could create resilience, they could create agility and so on. And we certainly need to look at that in terms of skills development going forward in our view. But we can talk about businesses, but businesses are made up of individuals. And before I hand over to Gavin, I guess I wanted to paint a picture, which would be, well, I'm sure we'll explore more with John on the panel shortly, about what might be the kind of future champion of our industry. What are the kind of attributes of the person or people who are going to succeed? And this is just an empirical view to create some debate. At the end of the day, our industry is quite a technical industry. There's no getting away from that, and there's no kind of embarrassment in that. There's strong foundations. Things need to work, they need to be solid, they need to be reliable, and they need strong technical foundations. So we're certainly strong believers that people need those foundations if they're going to succeed. Having said that, the world is changing. I talked about the telco tech, the open architectures that this conference is talking about. People of the future will need a lot broader knowledge base, perhaps less deep, but broader than they traditionally needed, certainly in the telco space, to survive and thrive. So they need to understand a lot more about other tech environments and other kinds of solutions is going to be key. The other piece is people are short on time these days. People want to get concepts quickly. They want to know whether it's relevant for them, what's in it for them, the so what factor. And I guess traditionally, and I'm probably thinking about some of our customers and engineers and people who are really moving the industry forward potentially, communication skills and having a strong flair of getting their points across, surmising it quickly is not something that's necessarily gone hand in glove with being a great engineer, and I think that's going to be really important. Clearly, people are working together, a lot less in silos, they're working across companies, they're working internationally, so the need to be able to think about ecosystems and think beyond your immediate company, your immediate environment, and have the skills to bring teams together that might not always agree on everything, and how do you get those different parties working together. And lastly, it's about being adaptable. We're seeing the pace of change at this event, and that's the constant, isn't it? It's going to continue. And people who aren't able to adapt, roll with the punches, in our view, are going to probably struggle, and they're not going to be the kind of champions that I'm positioning here. So what I'll do is I'm going to hand over to Gavin now, and then we'll be leading into the panel. But Gavin's going to talk a little bit about, well, okay, in all of that context, what are we finding? And as leaders, motivating and creating the right environment for people in our teams, people in our organisations, what does that need to look like?
Thanks, Dave. Hello, everybody. My name is Gavin Mitchell. I'm the CEO of Empirical. I'm also an active trainer for Empirical, so I do, speak to a lot of people. I do quite a bit of training still. I wasn't expecting to have 25 minutes, so I've got some themes, some trends that we're seeing in the industry. By the end of this session, I might be talking about 5G service-based architecture, new radio frame structure, whatever, just to fill some time, so that I won't bring it to worry. Right, so Empirical, Dave mentioned this earlier on. As a business, we like to keep engaged with our customer base, so some of our products we sell on a license basis, and it's not a case of just selling a license and moving on. We do try to keep engaged, and part of that is we do conduct learning and development surveys with our customers. These statistics that you can see on screen they're from 2020, which bearing in mind was around about the time of COVID. This was our kind of last big public survey that we did to our customers. But since then, we continue to conduct surveys, more internal surveys for big customers. And the statistics that we see, that you can see on the screen here, are very similar. So things like professionals today see, obviously they're interested in holidays, salary, etc. But their learning and development also needs to be a factor in whether they take a job. They see it as an entitlement, not just a nice to have, an afterthought, etc. At the time, it was all about COVID. As you can appreciate, during the COVID days and months and years, more training was done. People had time to fill, particularly people who had to migrate away from an office environment. To be fair, a lot of the engineers we teach work from home all the time anyway, but there was a considerable amount that realised that they did need to do more training. And then finally, we do work with a lot of HR departments as well, because learning engagement, learning and development often is part of the HR responsibility. We hear time and again that people are asking more and more about, okay, if I come to work for you, what training opportunities can you give me? Because everyone, or many people, are very interested in continued professional development. At an organisation, in order to keep the workforce, and particularly the engineering workforce, up to date and prepared, learning and training, it's got to be approached correctly. So before COVID, I've done a lot of live training, stood in front of people, where we'll go to a site, we might spend 2 days with them, we might spend 5 days with them. It's really intensive training, and for some organisations, just giving their staff 5 days of training a year is appropriate and it's adequate. And in reality, let's be realistic, we're humans, and 6 months after an intensive 2-day course, I wonder how much is actually retained by the people who attended it. Time and again, I've been to organisations when I've said, when was the last time you had training? And it's kind of shrug of the shoulders, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And I'm talking about big carriers here who technically you'd think would have the budget to spend on training. So training needs to be set up and it needs to be managed. And the first place is really the training resources that are provided to the workforce. And again, this is not about just shoving somebody on a live training course and saying, yeah, they've had their training, that's enough. So you need to give people resources that are available to them 24/7, because a lot of people are shift workers. So they've got to be available 24/7. They've got to be available at the right time and covering the right topics as well. So, there is a place for live training, and there always will be, and some people still think it's the Rolls Royce of training. But in reality, it's got its issues, and there are newer training initiatives, newer ways to do training that can be more effective. So the resources really need to be there. What I'm really talking about here is largely recorded training, which a lot of people don't like because they're used to conducting live training, but it is the future. We are seeing more and more of our customers move to a recorded training approach. You still need that live interaction, so the training companies like Empirical need to have a blended approach to their learning. So the resources need to be there, but fundamentally the motivation needs to be there as well. So we see organisations who maybe buy 50 licenses from us for a 12-month period, and unless that organisation is on board and driving the usage of those licenses, we can see very little usage in some cases. So we've got this diagram. The ideal scenario is for the individual to be self-driven. That's the best way that you're going to see people learning. It's not about getting a manager and telling the team, right, you are doing this training and you need to be doing it by this point in time. I've been on courses saying, yeah, great training, but I've no idea why I'm sat here. So they need to understand why they're there if they are being made to do training. But ideally, the best learners that we see, the people who use our tools the most, are the people who are self-driven, and that really needs to be promoted. And this, I guess, relates to the whole environment, and I'm not talking about giving staff members a quiet place to learn, whether it's at home or in the office or whatever. It's about nurturing and fostering a positive learning environment for staff. You know, we don't want to be in a situation where somebody's taking time out of their job to do learning and is then looked down upon because of it. So the time needs to be given, and we'll come to time management in a moment, but fostering an environment where learning is positively encouraged. And then finally, we do have time management, and if anything, this is the major point, and Dave touched on it on a number of occasions. People need to be given the time to train. It's not something that, you know, particularly if we're talking about recorded training, it's not something that you can give people and expect them to do that in their own time. And many organisations who've gone down this route make that mistake. So we always promote the fact that you must provide time to staff to do their training over a 12-month period. It will be up to them to perhaps manage that. So that's just some of the key areas that need to be addressed. I've got a few more, but don't worry, I won't be going through every single one of them. A lot of these areas are kind of trends that we've seen in the job that we do and the customers that we work with, and we do work across a number of different industry verticals. But the reason we've kind of showed this as a jigsaw is they are often intrinsically linked to one another. So for example, what we've seen a lot of is the requirement for much more modular training, much more bite-sized training, micro-learning. You know, the way that we develop our content now is designed to fulfill a very short period of time in which somebody might have a learning opportunity. And this, I guess, relates to just-in-time learning. So, you know, customers say to us, we want resources whereby if we're going into a meeting, maybe it's a project kickoff or whatever else, I just need to brush up on a single topic, I've got 15 minutes, and that's the kind of material that we need. So yes, we do the really in-depth stuff that takes a little bit of time to develop and to engage with, but we also look at much more bite-sized training. The other area that we see a lot of is people don't want to just hear somebody talking over a PowerPoint constantly. They need to engage with training using different tools. So we look at different reference tools, tools to really enhance learning, because people do learn in different ways. And a lot of that, a big part of that is, I guess, the practical element as well. Okay, so theory is fantastic, it cements what people need to know, but a lot of people learn by doing, so the practical aspect of training is fundamental as well. We're also seeing, and this is being touched on this week, that, you know, the telecoms industry is behind the rest of the industries in terms of where we're at and keeping pace. There's a lot of exciting new tech coming on board into telecommunications networks, as we've been talking about all week. The reality is that engineers today in the networks, they need less of a really deep understanding, because a lot of the time that's the vendors who can really get into detail, but they need a much broader scope. It's not just about understanding the signaling flows related to a 5G procedure. They need to know about cloud, they need to know about virtualization, they need to know about disaggregation, etc., etc. The one last one I'll point out is quite an interesting one, is it's commercial awareness, and you often hear criticism against the engineers because perhaps they're not as commercially savvy as the rest of the organisation. I'll give you a good example of that. I was teaching a 5G course, let's just say in Europe, to a big European operator, and the reason I was teaching the course was they were just deploying standalone 5G, so I was teaching them standalone 5G, and I said to them, why are you deploying standalone 5G? What's the business case? What do you expect to get from it? And nobody could answer me on the entire course. They were the engineers, they deal with the technical implementation, but the commercial awareness just unfortunately wasn't there. So, concluding a little bit early, so I might get onto the service-based architecture, but just some key things to take away from this. Time is critical, and it's absolutely crucial that students, learners are given the time to engage with the learning resources that they are indeed provided with. We've also got the fact that we do need blended training options, so video-based training is not the only answer. We need practical skills-based training. We need live training, whether that's in a virtual environment or indeed in a face-to-face environment. And then the final point is the training, whatever it is, has got to be able to adapt to the demand in the market. The demand that comes from new technologies being adopted, but the demand in terms of that training needs to be there at the right time. It needs to be available at the right time. And that concludes our presentation on how we've experienced learning trends in recent years. So there's our details. Dave and I will be around, so if you do want to discuss anything related to training about Empirical, feel free to chat to us.
One, two, there we go. Thank you very much, Dave and Gavin. I thought that was really, really good. And I'd just like to remind everyone in terms of what's on the chairs. I think it's absolutely amazing, and it says a lot about Empirical as a company and people who work there, that they're doing, not only offering trials for people, but then actually using that for good across the world. I think, as I say, it's a very, very noble and a fantastic thing to do. So I thank you for that. Thank you for the presentation today. So, as you can see, some more chairs are arriving behind me, and that's because we're going to have a panel session today. We're going to go through some of the ideas about how do we actually create the next generation of future industry, well, how do we create the industry leaders of the future. And so with all that said, I'd like to invite all of our panelists to the stage, is what it's called. Come on up, guys. So, thank you very much for joining us today. Just move this on. There we go. So, the first thing we should do on any panel is obviously introduce ourselves. So, in time-honored tradition, I think we'll just go straight from my left. Tell us a bit, obviously your name, where you're from, and a little bit about what you're doing within that organisation.
Hey, my name is François Moore. I'm a network architect and advisor for Fujitsu. I'm based in Richardson, Texas, and I come from a background of optical transmission.
Thanks very much.
Hi, I'm not going to labour it because obviously we've had our chance to tell you a little bit about myself and Empirical. So yeah, 30 years in the sector, originally as an engineer who sold my engineering soul, as I like to say. It taught me a lot about what the industry needs and how we develop the skills.
Right, well I wear two hats. So Leslie Holt, I'm Director for Acceleration and Adoption with WM5G, so delivering hands-on awareness and activity to primarily SMEs, small medium enterprises. But the hat I'm wearing today, which is an important one relating to skills, is WM5G are one of the key partners delivering UK TIN. So that's the UK Telecoms Innovation Network. And I could tell you a lot about it, but the key important thing is that we're leading on the talent and skills element.
And it is very, very important. I'm very, very pleased that you joined us today. And the gentleman on the end.
Good afternoon. My name is Nabil Chair. I work for a company called LabLabi, and I am based in London. We are a French company, and we are focused on training, so extremely happy to be here today to add as much value as I can to this panel.
Fantastic, thanks for that, Nabil. I'm actually going to start with you today, Leslie, if that's okay. So, in time-honored tradition, before we kind of talk specifically about what we can do to create the next industry leaders, what I'd really like to know is, what do you actually think the next generation of industry leaders look like? What's the makeup of them in your experience?
Okay, I'm going to cheat and give you, I'm going to give you 3 points, but my first point is here and now. So we absolutely do have to look to the future, but just take talent generally. Talent is the raw ingredient for any sector, so it's a vital component part. It's vital for our sector now. We need engineers to design, to manage, to look at all the connectivity issues we've got here and now. We've got an issue. Certainly talking from the UK perspective, we've got, this is it 50% of job vacancies are for engineers in the telecom jobs, you look 50% for engineers. So we've got a problem here and now. So actually tackle that before we actually look to the future. But we've got to look to the future super quick as well, because we're in a fast-paced kind of sector. So kind of the second thing I would say is, what skills do we need? So the worlds of IT and telecoms are colliding. You know, there's lots of technical skills here in the room today and at the event will know what I'm talking about absolutely more than I do. So actually, what are those skills? But look, just take one, for example, a software engineer. We need them in telecoms, they need them in IT, there's a shortage of them. So now we're actually not looking at just the skills, we're looking at how we're competing with other sectors. So that's important. And then I think the third thing, if I'm looking to the future here, John, is actually more than that. Actually, connectivity is super important for, AI, Internet of Things. It's a vital component part. Actually, that touches every sector. So now we're actually competing not just with one sector, we're competing with a vast number of sectors. So, how do we tackle those problems? So I suppose I'm coming at it from a barriers perspective. I'm coming from it from the fact that we've got an imbalance of supply and demand, which is really important to look at.
I think you make some absolutely fantastic points there, actually, particularly about the competition between industries. Nabil, I'm going to come to you. You actually work with the future of the industry in many ways. LabLabby are a very young company, very talented people. I was speaking to Miriam, who was here today, one of your colleagues yesterday, who was looking at telecoms in a way that I would never have thought about. So, do LabLabby have an idea of, in terms of what you're doing, in terms of the people you work with, what you think kind of the next generation of leaders might look like within the industry?
That's a very good question. I think earlier I thought I heard about the future, looking at the future. We think in LabLabby that the future is actually here. And we formed a company completely focused on onboarding, upskilling, and reskilling. And it's the fundamental thing is there is a paradigm shift in our industry, which is disaggregation between the hardware and the software. That means there are new skills that are already lacking skills in telecom. But I take the example of Leslie. If anybody, an employer, is looking for the right skills in the industry today, he has two ways to go about it. He can go to new engineers who are very skilled in software development, but don't really understand what would be their role in the telecom sector. Okay, so this is for us a reskilling. Okay, and we've seen examples of some big European customers. If you take a telco engineer like myself, then I've been working in 2G, 3G, 4G. We reach now a generation of disaggregation of our software to implement IoT and 5G, whatever. I need to know about Kubernetes. I need to understand OpenStack. I need to understand Docker. These are new technologies. So it's a new way of thinking, which is now bringing it brought together under what we call telco cloud, and which is 100% the focus that LabLabby has in the market, creating. And we're proud to say our motto is democratizing telco cloud skills in the market. That's what we do.
Absolutely brilliant. And just going to you for a second, Dave. I think one of the things that you mentioned in your presentation that certainly resonated with me, which is about bite-sized learning. As anyone who may learn a foreign language, for example, I use something called Duolingo, which is a famous app for making sure I can continue to order drinks when I'm in France. What, in terms of the next level of skills, do you see at Empirical in terms of how do you continue to build those skills within the kind of empirical model?
Okay, yeah, I think it is about, like we alluded to, getting far beyond just the technical foundations to make the leaders of the future that make this industry exciting. It is exciting. It's the breadth of opportunity. There's challenges that we're clearly addressing this week in how do you make all that tech work. But what a better showcase to make it exciting. And I think we can, by making it bite-sized, it makes it a way of it's a continuous learning journey. Picking up on your Duolingo example, I do Duolingo as well. You're constantly being prompted, why haven't you been and touched in today for 5 minutes? But we kind of need to make the learning journey in the industry like that. It's not kind of some big thing you do once or twice a year. There's constant things changing, constant things you need to know about. And I think people will embrace it a lot more, and that's what we're certainly trying to do, that it's a kind of more continuous, bite-sized journey, as opposed to big slugs of education that you do and then maybe don't use and so on.
which are brilliant. Just going to you, Francois, obviously you'll have a slightly different future on the vendor side, as we'd say. So from a more technical point of view, I guess, how do you see things moving forward into the skills needed?
I'll be a little bit of the contrarian on this one. But first of all, if you want to learn how to order a drink in French, I can help you, because I'm from Montreal. So the vendors, I think what's going to happen is the industry is going to need different sets of skills depending on where you are in the vertical. Here's an example. We spent 3 days here talking about disaggregation, telco cloud, virtualization, 5G RAN. From an operator perspective, it's almost like you're going to need people who are very good generalists who understand how to integrate IT, integrate telecom, work with the cloud suppliers, and perform that integration. So you're going to increasingly need individuals who understands all of these pieces and how they assemble together. However, and this is where maybe the equipment and software suppliers point of view comes in, is there is still going to be a very large need for individuals that are extremely specialized in specific areas of technology. For example, I work every day, I've spent my whole career in optical transmission. Optical transmission, like we've been talking about this week with OOBT, for example, we talk about it in terms of stack. We talk about it in terms of APIs. But there's still a lot of knowledge that is required for things like understanding optical physics, understanding DSP design. The world is still analog. And I can tell you, we'll discuss it on a follow-up question, we have a harder and a harder time gaining access to experienced analog individuals such as RF design for wireless, beamforming. There's a lot of technology behind beamforming. And most universities now have moved much higher on the protocol stack. They're talking about regenerative AI. They're talking about cloud. They're talking about FPGAs. And they're no longer teaching all the underpinning of technology that are still required every day in the infrastructure. So I agree with all of my co-panelists, and this is probably not something that can be thought by companies like yours, because this is highly specialized things. But I have to say that we can't compete with the Google and the Facebooks and attract people because in a lot of cases these skills are less and less being provided in the university segment.
I think that's an interesting point. I mean, if I was to come to you, Dave, based on my empirical work, I suppose the question there would be then, therefore, if you can't compete with certain companies at a certain level, what impact can you have in terms of how can you as an organisation actually work within the sector to make sure you are developing the next generation of stars and industry leaders?
Well, I think I mean, I agree with what Francois says. There is that kind of two levels, and I realise the kind of main audience that we're pitching to. But I think for us, there is a very traditional world of telco, and our role in that is actually evidencing and showing that it is actually quite different. It is exciting. You'll get involved in so many kind of different things that you just traditionally wouldn't have ever thought of in the world of telco. So I think that's really what we're trying to be about. It is at the more broader, general application level, but making that kind of world, that kind of career, those kind of opportunities as exciting as it might be to just go into maybe traditionally that bright, shiny tech world.
Leslie, I can see you nodding away there, so I'm actually going to come to you on this one. So obviously in terms of where WM5G are up to, what's your view? You've got boots on the ground, you're speaking across industries, talking across various different areas. How's the view from your side in terms of, okay, as an organisation, what can we do? How can we push it forward?
To accelerate skills?
Yes.
Okay, so I think in my mind, 3 things I'm going to touch on. I'm going to repeat a few things that people have said. So I think there's reskilling, attracting new talent, and rebranding. So reskilling, we've heard a lot here about what opportunities there are to reskill. An interesting fact, probably UK fact actually, but a third of our engineers and operators on the networks are not capable of taking on some of the emerging new technologies because they're not skilled. So that's a workforce that we've got that we're not looking at. Not as broadly as we should do. So that's the thing. Just another, I think, associated fact, again UK based, is that we looked at job satisfaction amongst engineers. Telecoms engineers are at the bottom quartile of that. So you've got a workforce that a third need reskilling and a good proportion of them are dissatisfied. So there's a big piece of work about motivation, I think, there. And I'm going to add something else that I think is kind of linked. And I think it's, get my facts right, but I think it's near enough 60% of engineers in the UK are over 50. So you're going to be losing a lot of talent. And actually, perhaps it links to what Francois was saying, is that it's some talent, it's skills that perhaps we still need. There's the new skills and some of the old skills combined. So I think that's interesting. Now, the second thing is attracting new talent. Now, that's super hard to do, but let's take a look at 11 to 19-year-olds. 50% don't know what an engineer is. So if we don't know what an engineer is, and I quite like what you said about the super exciting things we're working on, we need to get that message out there because there's a big proportion don't know. I've got being honest about diversity because, again, we're not good as a sector, we're quite poor. We've got, I think, 5% under 35 in our sector, and we've got 5% of engineers that are women. Now, there's more to diversity than that, and I'm not got being a bonnet about diversity. It's just actually, there's talent pools out there that we're not tapping into. So why are we not tapping into that? I've got a stat from the US actually. If you advertise a job and you say it has to be degree level, I think it's 64% of the adult working population will not then come into the appropriateness to apply for a job. So these are just interesting things that actually, can we look at different, we talked about different skills and opportunities here. Are there different entry points that we can look at? How can we attract younger people in? And my last point is brand. We know, I know, because I'm not a technical person, but I work with some super interesting people that work on fantastic projects. I know that connectivity plays a massive part in, satellites, in, streaming live events, intricacies of some of the health interventions that we do are enabled by connectivity. Fantastic. But if we talk technical language to some of the particularly young people that are looking at careers, it's not enticing them in. So we need to be kind of rebranding it for a different generation, to not talk technical, but to talk about actually what we deliver, because it's super exciting things out there.
I completely agree. I'd also say from the diversity side, it's a huge part of what TIP's working on at the moment, in terms of actually how do you increase opportunities, how do you make it more exciting, and it's incumbent, the word that's often used is be an ally, and I think it's really important that everyone takes that kind of role within the industry to really push this forward. I'm going to come to you in a second, Nabil, but I'm just going to turn to Francois a bit, because obviously what Leslie's touched on there is very much that kind of big world view. Once again, when it comes to the reality within kind of the vendor world and who does these things, I've used reality in possibly the wrong way. But where does it sit with you, within the industry from your seat?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying I live in reality. Yes, I totally agree with what you said about the graying of I call it the graying of the industry, and I include myself in that. I talk to customers all the time in North America. As an optical supplier, I visit customers all the time, and I tend to specialize on the smaller customers, just from an organizational perspective. And typically the conversation goes like this. You visit a customer to tell them about the wonderful new technology that you come up with, and in optical networking, it's called next generation ROADM, coherent transmission, and you get glazed eyes. one of the main reasons is that these are small operators who don't have large training budgets. They're typically staffed very thinly, and their engineers are doing the right now urgent. And I have taken as an habit to include in the first couple of slides of my next generation optical standard presentation a few slides on explaining the technology without being too technical, to level the playing field and just tell them this is the before and after, this is how you do it today, but this is what the new technology will allow you to do, just so we can all get to a common understanding. The interesting part of this is that when COVID started, just like everyone else, I got stuck at home with not much to do. Well, less to do because we couldn't go anywhere. And I started turning into this content into a blog. And so I've published several blog entries on the corporate website for Fujitsu that explains all the new technology one by one, kind of bite-sized. And come to be known, it is one of the most popular blog entry that we have on our in the optical division. And there's a need out there for people to find that information, read it and say, okay, now I understand what a colorless ROADM is. And it's going to take me 5 minutes. And there is a lot of people in the industry, in the telecom vertical, who essentially need to do that. And in a lot of cases, they're out there by themselves without necessarily working at one of the big operators that have maybe more means to provide this type of training. So.
It's interesting actually, because I think one of the things you touched on there, you know, it's been the element in the room for years, what, you know, the kind of post-COVID-19 world, which actually leads me quite nicely into Labby, because obviously people's working habits have changed, and actually part of training is also that has to kind of replicate what's happening in our real lives, right? So I personally work from home, occasionally go to a shared office, but when it comes to the kind of Labby and how you're working, obviously you're virtual labs, so how are you seeing kind of moving forward from a Labby point of view, that kind of way of how can we use virtual labs to match people's working lives and all those kind of areas?
Okay, that's an excellent question. Actually, when we created the company, of course, we had a team of experts to focus on content, disaggregation, etc. We also looked very strongly at new ways to deliver the learning. Okay, so one of them was learning by doing. Okay, and of course, we work in collaboration with the training companies to do the practical and the theoretical side. It's an ecosystem of partners. And then we decided to create our training labs, if you want, on a cloud level, meaning they can be accessed anywhere, anytime. Now, I think I heard comments previously that companies need to give people time and not expect them to learn in their own time, because that's an important factor. However, having the facility to learn in your own time at home, from the office, in the train, or whatever, actually go and practice, as well as going through the theoretical part is very important. So we have really spent a lot of time thinking about how do we deliver the training, okay? So a blend of theory and practice, and secondly, accessible anywhere, anytime. We even looked at things like, can I train? Most of the existing training contracts are over 1 year. And from a practical viewpoint, we think that's not practical, because if you give an engineer 1 year to spend 30 hours on a lab to do some specific exercises, he's going to do 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. So our license pricing is based on 1 month. And it's on purpose 1 month, because you need to go through 30 hours of learning, and I think 1 month is enough time to do it. So the approach is about fitting, and it's interesting because we grew the company through the COVID times, but it's not just the COVID that's influenced our thinking, It's also the new generation of engineers. They are young, they are agile, they learn quickly, they are very smart. So you need to be to the point with what you're teaching them. And at the end of the day, I go back to the point I made earlier. We are not trying to tackle the future world. The paradigm shift in the industry has happened. This is why we are talking from our side to the existing incumbents. We are talking to the new players. There are many new players. And the opportunity, just maybe if you allow me to go on to that point, the new players are very interesting for us. The reason is they are very fast startups going into scale-ups and delivering something that's on purpose, but training is not their core business. And nor do they have time to dedicate to training. So they're really very happy to engage with companies like us to help them scale from a sales acceleration, from channel enablement. This is what we do. And I think my final point is, I go back to democratizing telco cloud industry, because it's about leveling up the knowledge right across. And it's not just telco, it's telco and Industry 4.0. They're all going through the same transformation. So it's a huge market. And really the right opportunity for us and all the companies sitting on this panel.
I appreciate that, because I think it's a really important thing. It's that thing about, okay, we're here. As you say, the paradigm shift feels like it's either happened or is happening, depending on where you sit within an industry at any given time. So, which that kind of leads me to, okay, this is crystal ball moment then, okay, the paradigm shift's happening or happened. Therefore, what do you, and I'll start with you, Francois, for a minute, what do you want to see then in terms of going forward, in terms of, if you had your choice of anything, what do you want to happen in the future for, trying to word this even better than I can, what do you want to see in the future will help accelerate the skills?
So, a few things. Some of it is aspirational and some of it is more real. In terms of real, there has to be, and this is where maybe organizations like Dip Academy can help, is I was alluding to the fact that I was providing some training as part of my standard delivery to a customer. One of the difficulties sometimes is there's an appearance of bias. If it's coming from a vendor, if it's something that I'm doing as part of at the end of the day, a product pitch, sometimes they say, well, this might be the Fujitsu version of it, or this might be the other people version of it. So I think one of the things that I like with Dip Academy, and I know you haven't gone to optical yet, you've been focusing on you've been focusing on the RAN, which rightfully so, the volume and the of RAN deployment dwarfs optical, is maybe Dip Academy can play a role where you go and you say, you know what, you need some upskilling in terms of optical or RAN or some subject. Dip Academy has something for you on that, and it doesn't come from a vendor. It can be vendor neutral. On the more aspirational aspect, we have at some point to find a way, and this connects to some of the comments there, to almost make, I'll say telecom, because at the end of the day, I call myself, when somebody says, what do you do for a living? I say, well, we're the plumbing of the internet, okay? We carry the bit from here to there, and we don't worry too much about the upper layer of the stack. People, in a sense, take us for granted, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to find optical talent, to find real-time system control loop talent, because everyone is in the upper application layer. We have to find a way to interest the next generation of engineers to devote time of their career lower, on the lower level of the stack. Otherwise, one day, it might not even be optical, it might be the routers, it might be the 5G wireless at the layer 0, at the fundamental physical layer, that essentially people like my generation who have spent 30 years in that industry will eventually retire, and then the cloud will run. Who's going to manage the underpinning of the cloud? That is easier said than done, because it's easier, in a sense, to teach things at the higher layers. It doesn't require as much investment in equipment, in test sets, in infrastructure from the universities that, of course, are always, there's some issues there. You know, I'm a part-time student. I'm doing my PhD as a part-time student. I talk to academia. There's less and less being taught in that area, and actually I've seen some of the classes, they're getting more and more outdated. So there needs to be a renaissance, if you like, of just the analog technology, chipset design, lasers, and so forth, so that we can make sure that we have a reliable infrastructure that sits under all the other higher layers of the cloud that everyone seems to be going to.
You use the word renaissance, which I think means rebirth. So we'll turn that around into kind of the change, I guess, that needs to happen within the industry. And Dave, you speak with companies, once again, across a range of industries within telco and beyond that. What do you see, or what would you like to see happening in the future that can really help kind of accelerate this industry, and accelerate kind of the skills within the industry?
I mean, we talked a lot about, obviously, the change in the underlying tech itself. I think, for me, it's probably a better recognition of kind of the change in people. We talked a lot about the new young engineers who are already in the sector, the ones who we're trying to attract. I think it's, because I look at myself, an engineer from 30 years ago, and kind of my mindset, what was expected of me by BT that I joined at that time versus a more modern telco company. And you did the stuff and you did the training program that the company needed you to do. People joining today are joining with a much different mindset. There's much, what's in it for me? How am I going to develop a whole range of broad skills? If I've got a broad range of skills, where can I take my career? How can I get loyalty and longevity in terms of service for the company? So I think companies and line managers, particularly, it's a corporate thing as well. Gavin talked in our presentation a little bit about the importance of managers, and because when you're a young engineer or an engineer, you look a lot to the immediate team and the managers that you're part of. You take your lead from that. So it's creating that kind of environment and recognising kind of the change in cultures of people and young engineers and so on. That we really need to nurture and cultivate that. It won't just happen. We'll lose people because we've not recognised that kind of change in what they want out of life of working in companies, being an engineer, what they want out of their careers.
Yeah. I actually agree with that. And then if I come to you, Leslie, obviously you can answer this with either one of the hats that you wish in terms of the question that's kind of coming. Because obviously, from the individual point of view, kind of company point of view, once again, from that more kind of industry consortia, shall we say, point of view, what kind of helps, if you could click your fingers on one thing to happen, or make a few things happen tomorrow, what would you like, what kind of change would you like to see that could really help push things forward?
I'm going to go for, can I go for 3? You're cheeky. So first of all, I think UK only exists in the talent space because of all the people we engage with, our stakeholders, so that's super important. So I want to grow our stakeholders, so the talent network's open. And the reason I say that is because actually I think collaboration is key. That's the reason I'm saying it, because our role is to kind of, actually, there's a lot of positive things out there, and we having such a wide group, we're seeing some of the good practice that's happened. So let's take a sector perspective, not just an organisational perspective, and share some of that good practice. So that's kind of one plea, and one kind of, I'm saying promotion, but please, we're there to serve the industry, and so we want to help. I think if I can take 2 things away then, one is it's so interesting to hear what Academy's doing, it's interesting to hear what Empirical are doing. I think the key is we've got to look at how we can get different levels of entry points into our sector to attract new skills. So we mustn't just close ourselves off to, it's got to be academic, you've got to have a degree. I think there are options out there, there's plenty of apprenticeship options. I don't think they're being promoted to the full, used to the full. So one plea would be, as an organisation, look what's out there, and if it's not there, let's help build it together. And then the kind of last thing is, again, it's UK Tin are looking at curating stories. So I want your stories. I want your stories of all the wonderful projects that are happening, so that we can articulate how exciting this sector is. I'm going to quote Vish here, because I was on a panel with Vish a few weeks ago, and he said something that the rest of the day everybody repeated, and that telecoms is not sexy. Well, I actually think it is. I think there are some exciting projects out there. So my plea again is, please tell us what they are, because we want to create those stories. We want to collate that collateral, share it with our group, so that actually when we're facing careers advisors, when we're going into schools, and I say we in the wider sense, it's us as well, but it's all our members, then we have these good news stories to share with people.
I agree with that. It's always nice to hear Vish being mentioned in the same kind of areas, the word sexy. That's obviously a great choice. Well, I will remind him of that later. So just kind of wrapping up the panel, because I think the kind of thing that really we want to get from today is, and I'll start with you, if I may, Nabil. If the people here today, the people watching the videos afterwards, what one thing would you encourage them to take away from something like this that they can implement in their business, implement in their life, that they can use to move forward and actually, once again, be an ally, create the next generation of leaders? What would be your...
If you allow me, I'm going to start by saying thank you to TIP Academy for a specific reason. It's not every day you have a major event where you have a specific opportunity to talk about skills. In the context where anybody on the major tier 1 and tier 2 telco, when we talk to them, list me, where do the skills, lack of skills fit in your pain points? It's in the top 3. So a suggestion I've made to you, I'm going to make now, okay, again, quite happy to contribute with the Europe members of the panel and others to create a working group within TIP Academy to be focused on skills. The reason is that there are disparate discussions on skills. Everybody knows it's a problem, but you have 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. What we need is to raise the level of the lack of skills as a real issue in the market, bring in contributors from the telcos, from Industry 4.0 companies, and I'm happy to be a contributor into creating a real discussion so that the right budgets are assigned. Okay? If there's a lot of budget within the telcos and others, but the budgets are assigned to usual stuff, okay? But new skills, new technology that they know is impacting their livelihood as a business, I think that it's not there yet. So we can take the lead, if you want, with the help of TIP Academy and ourselves to drive this forward.
But I think it's safe to say that Nabil may have been inspired by you in this case, as you've seen the great work that you're doing there, and gone, we need to replicate that, let's do our own version in many ways. So from your point of view, if you would give people one last kind of thought from, as I say, whichever hat you choose, or you can have 3, what would people take away? What would people
No, I won't be cheeky anymore. I'll stick with one, and I'll stick with UK Tin, is because I think that's brilliant, and UK Tin are trying to do similar. So I think and let's work together. TIP are part of UK Tin, and as are a lot of people in this room today. So my plea is, come and speak to us, talk to us from an opportunity perspective, talk to us from a problem perspective, and we've got, like I say, an arena to share and learn from others. So that's my plea. Contact UK Tin and find out more.
I would echo that sentiment. Dave, very much the same question.
Okay, yeah, I think building on probably a little bit that Nabil said and things we covered earlier, we talked about the future doesn't just happen, it's created. Please don't be a passenger in that process. You've got a sense from this panel and things at this event and other events. There's loads of things recognising this as an issue, but we'll only address this issue if people are passengers, they get involved, roll their sleeves up. Not everyone can be necessarily involved in groups we might form or various initiatives, but I talked before a little bit about the role back at base, back in the companies you work for, the teams you're managing, the people you're line managing. You can play a role in this in some way. Please don't be a passenger, create the future.
Thank you very much for that. And Francois, I'm going to finish with you on this one. Once again, from that kind of vendor point of view, what can people within that industry, what would you say is the one thing they should take away and implement within their own area to really push things forward?
Well, I'm not going to give you, as a vendor, there's not really a great answer to that question. I mean, vendors have a goal in life, and we all know what that is. But I can give you from my personal experience what I observe. I think there's two things. First of all, you have to recognize the gap. You know, when I was talking earlier of the fact that I was providing some ad hoc upskilling, I also encounter people who essentially say, this is how it's been done for the last 30 years, and I have, you know, this is how it's going to be. You know, there's a resistance to change. It's ingrained in the industries where people have been there for 20, 30 years. You know, and that's part of some of the you know, TIP is trying to push into a disaggregation model, but there are some places where they say disaggregation doesn't exist here. So there is a little bit of that where you need to be open to change. You need to recognize the gap, and there's also a sense of personal discipline. I mean, you have to remain constantly open to learn new things. And maybe there is one place where the industry can help, is be in better contact with the people on the ground that are providing teaching in your local universities. So, for example, for me, I'm based in Dallas. I routinely talk to individuals at the University of Texas in Dallas, where I just happen to be a part-time student, but I get to see what they are teaching. And I have to say that some of the professors I talk to, either through professionally or as a student, they learn a lot from us as well, where we say, well, this is not really how we use it, but have you considered looking at it this way? And a lot of that exchange is getting lost in what I call the financial pressures. Universities, a lot of the professors, they're focused on getting the next grant, they're getting the next piece of equipment from the supplier that they can put in their lab. And they sort of lose the forest from the tree. And this is not a simple problem, because it involves, you know, government funding, it involves a National Science Foundation type thing. But the financial pressure has become so big that they see us more as a provider of equipment, more as a provider of what do you need us to do to bring the emerging generation to the right set of skills that we need. Because I was talking earlier about generalists versus specialists. I have to say it's difficult to get some of the generalists with knowledge in cybersecurity, encryption, and all of that. They'll get the academic knowledge, but they don't have the experience. And if someone has the experience, they don't have the knowledge of the latest technology. So you're sort of none of the above a little bit. And that gap can be closed.
Well, I think there's plenty for everyone to take away today. I'd like to wrap up by just saying a final huge thank you to our sponsors, Empirical, for helping make today happen. But I'd also like a huge round of applause for what I think has been an absolutely fantastic panel. Just really, really pleased that you could join us today. You've been absolutely brilliant. Huge round of applause, please. Obviously, the panel will be around for questions, I would imagine, unless anyone has any questions they'd like to ask now. I'm sure you can find them around the floor, and do follow them up on the socials and all of those areas. Thanks so much for your time. Anyone who's traveling today, safe travels, and see you all soon. Thank you very much.